Welcome to Living It Up, Making Life Juicy. I'm Ingrid Guthrie, and I have a wonderful guest today. His name is Brandon DeWane, and he's with Brandywine Rolfing. Welcome, Brandon.
Thank you, Ingrid. It's very nice to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, you say that now. We have a really exciting show. We're going to be, first I'm going to be asking Brandon some questions about Rolfing, and then we're going to take over and do some table work, and he's going to be working on me. So, Brandon, tell us about Rolfing. How on earth did it come up with that name, Rolfing?
Yeah, it sounds kind of silly, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's basically compiled by Dr. Ida P. Rolf, and she's an old-time pioneer of acknowledging and having curiosities about fascia and connective tissue within our bodies.
Excellent.
And she started a whole modality of body work around that.
Now, when was she, here, let's, I know we're going to be flashing up some pictures of Ida, but here's Ida herself. And her, from 1896 to 1979, wow.
Yeah.
She's just got the look of love in her eyes. She's a real sweetie. So, how did you get into Rolfing?
I got into Rolfing not so much by seeking it out, but it sort of came to me, ironically enough. I was a full-time glassblower at the time with a local company called Simon Pierce, and we make all kinds of functional hand-blown, hand-finished crystalware. And so a buddy of mine, he is a rolfer himself, and he moved into the area and was starting up practice, and he approached me one day, "Hey Brandon, how about we barter some body work for glass?" He wanted some crystalware for gifts and for his cabinets.
Oh,
so
that's nice.
early on, I was like, yeah, it sounds great. And I wasn't really seeking any kind of body work so much, and I kind of thought he might benefit more than me. So little did I know that it would be majorly the opposite way. And I started to go through the whole 10 series of sessions, which is sort of like the hallmark of Rolfing.
Okay.
It makes the work very holistic. So it covers the body multiple times through 10 sessions to try and appropriate the tensions and pull and tug on our bones, which kind of pull us out of posture at times.
Okay.
So
let's backtrack a little bit.
Sure.
How did it affect you? What you went in, I mean, I would guess that glass blowing is very physically demanding.
It is. There's lots of repetitive motions and stress. And I was often not so much upright and centered, but kind of working, turning a pipe out here. And so I was very asymmetrical through the whole production process.
Right.
And I started to feel within myself, maybe around session 5 and 6, which this whole process took about a half a year to go through for both of us due to scheduling and difficulties around that. But I started to realize that
in a normal practice, like in your practice, it doesn't take that long.
No,
the sessions, of course. Okay.
So I started to realize that when I would go into the glass studio and have like a sort of traveling discomfort from day to day, it might be the left wrist one day, it could be the shoulder the next, the neck or the low back, common sort of you know, not feeling so good areas that we all experience. And that all started to dissipate. And I started to feel a greater ease and comfort within myself.
Oh, physical
which helped me on the job as well.
Yeah, oh, I'll bet.
Yeah.
I'll bet. And it probably reduced a lot of stress.
It did.
Too.
It did.
And then...
mentally and physically.
That's so wonderful. Who doesn't want that?
Yeah.
So you've talked about what you've seen it do for yourself, and what do you see it do for your clients?
Well, I see overall just a greater ease of just sort of being. It's like, wow, I often hear I feel lighter. I feel like I'm not holding myself so much. I can stand without with a heavier felt sense, but everything feels lighter at the same time.
Right.
More range of motion is commented on, less stress, like I said, physically and emotionally, mentally.
Well, I mean, when you're holding all this stress in your body, you feel kind of crappy anyway, so you might as well just release it to feel better.
So I recently had a client that stood up, and after, I don't remember, maybe halfway through the whole 10 series, she stood up and she basically stated, wow, I feel like for my whole life I've been sort of like a coat hanger up in my shoulders and sort of hanging my whole body from there. And I don't feel like I'm using that coat hanger anymore. It's like, it just all of this let go.
Oh, that makes me feel like I can take a breath. Yeah. I mean, there are so many pains that we go through with every day that we don't even realize that we have, you know, and we're just so accustomed to them. And the human body is so adaptable. Humans are very adaptable. But why live with them if you don't have to? And none of this is to take the place of a, you know, a medical doctor, of course, you know, but
Sure.
But still, if the help is out there, go for it, right? Now, talk about the Rolfing paradigm.
Okay, so we basically have like 4 separate taxonomies that we look at when we're going into every session. So every session is always going to be unique in the moment for that individual. And I don't really repeat a session the same any time. So it really kind of makes it like a craft or art form in a sense. And
a one-of-a-kind piece of work,
so I'm trained to take in the person as a whole, first by looking at the structural components. So we can kind of look at that as like a geometric approach as well, and how we're stacked up. Are we organized around a midline, or maybe is our hip out to the right and like maybe left shoulder's held up? So we look at that. We look at functional as an aspect or a taxonomy. And so with functional, I'm basically watching someone as they walk and seeing how their body moves and responds, and just watching them do different activities and seeing how they use their body. So we all create different movement patterns into our daily life. The 2 other taxonomies are energetic and psychobiological.
Okay.
So the energetic first is if there is, I'm trying to sense, is there a restriction somewhere? Is there like a bound up, maybe knot or adhesion somewhere in the soft tissue that might be restricting a full range of movement through there? And often with that kind of restriction, it's almost like a potential energy that's held in there. And when I open it up or help the person to let it go, then that energy just sort of radiates out, and it's not so bound up in that spot.
Super.
Psychobiological, it's basically we're trying to see the direct connection and relationships between our mind and our body. And even though we look at them as separate, they can often affect one another. So if I physically hurt and my shoulder, it just day in and day out, it's causing me grief, and you know, I get angry possibly over
the physical
trauma
pain,
and pain,
that you might not even be aware of.
Right, so the physical pain can affect my mind and mental outlook or worldview.
And makes us cranky.
Yeah, for sure. And when we feel more at ease and more open and spacious, and I notice we might become more tolerant and not so cranky. And of course, the things that we might think about, I mean, if we think about the world as, we have about 5 more minutes. The thing that, if we think about the world as being, you know, just a lost cause, then we could just be, you know, have this sense of this physical, useless posture, you know. Rather, and that would need to get worked out as well. Sure. So I'm trying to take all those into consideration for the session and for the individual in the moment. and noticing how they all affect one another.
So it's an extremely holistic
It is, yes.
way of dealing with the entirety of the individual.
Absolutely.
Talk about tell us about the art form. Tell us about, I did have one of his sessions yesterday, and it was resounding. And I remember, yeah, no, thank you. And I woke up this morning and I felt like the world was my oyster. So that was a really wonderful thing. I emailed Brandon, like, I feel the world is my oyster today. This is great. And I just had to share that with you all because that was pretty great. I remember thinking that Rolfing back in the 80s had kind of a real physical, painful reputation, but it wasn't like that at all.
It's come a long way, and at the Rolf Institute of Structural Integration, where I became a certified Rolfer through, they have such a rich community there from practitioners and instructors that learn directly from Ida herself, and then how it's all transformed after she, passed.
Right.
So we're all trying to carry on her vision, and through that, we're finding new ways to work where the client will be more responsive. So if it's very deep and painful, we often sort of cringe and grab and hold, and it doesn't feel so safe.
Right, and you can't release if you're grabbing.
Yeah, exactly. So it's really taken on a more sensitive approach instead of the typical notion that it hurts.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to hurt.
Yeah.
It
How
should
about
feel
that?
good.
Yeah, it felt great yesterday. It felt great. So talk about the art form.
The art form. Okay, so I'm working with an individual and taking into consideration that I'm working with a whole living being.
I feel like I just kind of threw you a curveball. So let me backtrack by
that's okay.
blending it into, no, it's not. That's really rude as a host to do. Let me just blend it in with the glass blowing and how you likened it to creating.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
A piece.
Right. So I never really know how to, in a certain session, exactly what I'm going to do to help tissue release and open up in a certain area. So I'm kind of moving around the whole person at different times and trying to feel for a relationship of connection through the fascia and through the connective tissue, and trying to see how it relates, maybe from foot up to hip, or from foot through hip up into shoulders, or how it affects the spine. So I always have to take a different approach, and everyone has their held tensions in different areas, and it's kind of up to me to sort of, where are they held, and get in there, kind of feel and sense where they might be held, and then try and work through that held line of transmission.
Yeah. And I could see that as kind of smoothing out the glass and just making it just...
And glass is always different. It's never the same. There's always going to be different temperatures, different quantities, different shapes to work with. So it's just like people. We're all different shapes and sizes and move different.
Yeah. So this is Brandon DeWane of Brandywine Rolfing, and I'm Ingrid Guthrie. This is Living It Up, Making Life Juicy. Thank you so much for joining me today, Brandon.
Thank you,
so we're going to move on to the table. Ooh. And you can also find us on Facebook at Living It Up, Making Life Juicy. Welcome to Living It Up, Making Life Juicy, and I'm striking a pose. I have with me today Brandon DeWane from Brandywine Rolfing, and welcome, Brandon.
Thank you. Feels good to be here.
Thanks. Feels good to be me right now. Give us a little quick history about Rolfing, and then let's get into the work that you do.
Okay. So Rolfing is a hands-on body work that I work with people. It was created by Ida P. Rolf, a doctor, and she basically was the fascia and connective tissue pioneer. When a lot of people are looking at muscles and organs, she's like, well, what's all this three-dimensional matrix of sort of like cobwebby stuff?
There's Ida
that
right
links
there.
Our whole body. So I work with fascia and connective tissue.
Now tell us about fascia.
So fascia is, it's basically, if it were to be an organ, it would be the organ of form. So it's kind of what connects and contains everything in our body.
So it's not that we're held together by skin, we're held together by fascia, and that's right underneath the skin.
Exactly.
Is that right? Do I have this right?
You do, yeah.
Okay.
So within this whole three-dimensional fascial matrix, there's connective tissue, so some are softer, some are more dense, so we have tendons, ligaments.
Yeah.
We have just the fascia that wraps around bone. It's what bone grows within is the fascia. What the muscles sort of grow and dwell within is fascia. So it really sets our whole container space.
I love it.
And on a cellular level, it actually responds or adapts to certain conditions. So if there's a lot of, say right in here, if there's a lot of like bound up tension, like it might be a little more tense right in here, how is that restricting and possibly constricting the cells? So cells in a certain area, they dwell within this interstitial fluid. So in that localized environment, which is connected throughout the whole, it basically is related to laying down denser or stronger tissue for more support.
Right.
Or if it doesn't have a whole lot of tension in there, it doesn't need that like real tight, rigid connective tissue. It's a little more softer and fluid and responsive.
So if you're out of whack, if your body's out of whack, then you're going to build up more fascia, maybe even more...
Yeah, it might get more sticky, bunchy, clumpy. It might be that sort of knot that's up in your shoulder that just won't go away. So through this kind of work, I'm trying to work with your body as a whole to give an appropriate tension without. So I'm taking into consideration trying to balance your tissue from left to right, from front to back, from down into the ground, and then up towards the sky, and then also from outside, so just under the skin, going deep in towards the bone, and then coming back out. So we have all these different layers, say from superficial, from right under the skin to deep. So we're trying to give more space and more length and differentiation to the tissue to make it slide and glide with more ease, so it's not all stuck and bound together.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so what are we going to work on first?
Well,
eager.
Hips are always a tight spot for many people, and how are you feeling in your hips today?
I got to tell you, I had a session with Brandon yesterday, and I'm feeling like the world is my oyster.
That's great.
Yeah, it did not hurt. I mean, not like it didn't hurt at all. So,
great.
Yeah, why don't you show them what you were doing with the IT band down here yesterday?
So right around here we have this this bony nub. It's the greater trochanter of the femur. We kind of reference this as our hip bone, but it's not where the true ball and socket joint is.
Right.
But this can be a very tight spot on many people.
Oh, yes.
And mine has been very tight through the years.
Oh, and didn't you come into this with a, get familiar with Rolfing due to some physical challenges that you had?
I did, yeah. Just sort of like a traveling tension and pain from working in a production glass studio. And a lifelong pattern of having bow legs, which I could never touch my knees together. There were always a good like 1.5 inch gap in between them. Yeah,
and talk about undue strain and duress on all the other parts of your body, the other muscles, and talk about fascia being locked up in certain areas.
So how's all this work feeling right now?
It feels great.
Does any of it feel sensitive or tender to you?
It feels sensitive and tender in the parts, like he has this knack of just going right to where, right to where you need it, which is perfect, you know.
So this whole area is kind of like a tension balancer at our hip for our leg, and we have in the front this muscle, tensor fascia lata, that comes down the front side, and in the back we have gluteus maximus, and they both kind of blend into a long band tendinous attachment called the IT band, or iliotibial tract. So it really comes around and connects right into the tibia down here in the low leg. So this whole area sort of goes across two joints here, so it has a major impact and influence on how we move and where we move from. So I feel it's a little tighter on the back here. I'll start to just
a little bit.
Get into it a little bit and start to soften it up, kind of break up some of the bunchy quality. And how is this feeling?
Good.
Yeah?
Good, yeah.
So I'm sensing another area that's tight is kind of right down in here. I can just sort of sense by touching it if it's a little bunched up and could use a little release. So
nice.
I often use different tools for this work. This is probably one of my biggest tools.
Your elbow.
And it's my elbow, yeah. So I'm just trying to be highly aware of what your tissue feels like under my contact, and here it feels a little tighter, so I'm just going to move a little slower.
Okay.
And
yeah,
pay a little more attention to this area.
Yeah.
So this work, it doesn't really have a whole lot of fast movements to it. Often watching molasses drop out of a jar is quicker and possibly more exciting to watch, because often this work, it just moves really slow, trying to open up certain areas to make the tissue more soft, fluid, hydrated, and just free to move.
Yeah. And in a second, we're going to move to some shoulder things. I know a lot of people have shoulder issues.
Yeah.
And you would recommend 10 sessions, right?
I do, because
that's
Rolfing,
the traditional package, right?
Yeah. So it makes the work very holistic through the whole 10 sessions. It covers from head to toe multiple times. And what I'm trying to do when I'm working with someone through a whole 10 series of sessions is sort of have an approach like planing wood. So I'm just trying to shave off layer by layer in the tense areas and not overlook any layer that might be closer to the surface or skin and get distracted by a deeper layer. So I'm trying to really just go from superficial right under the skin and slowly go deeper and deeper and deeper. So through the 10 series, how it works is you start off very, very close to the skin and surface, superficial sessions for 1, 2, and 3. And there's sort of like a mini series in itself, covers the whole body territory, and it preps the body for deeper work to come.
Nice.
And deeper is really just affecting our core or our spine.
Nice.
So we really try and bring the work from the ground on up. So how is this feeling?
Nice.
Is there any pain or discomfort?
No, it feels like it's releasing it. Let's move on to your bench, because this is interesting. And who hasn't gone through life without some kind of back issues?
Yeah, I haven't dodged that one myself, unfortunately.
So I should face this way?
Yep, face that way.
Okay.
And if you could, here, let me set you up a little. So if you could have your shin straight up and down, And now find a good ground and support through your feet.
Okay.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to contact right up in here.
Okay.
And I'm going to have you just sort of bend forward in a forward flexion, one vertebrae at a time.
Okay.
And I'll work along your spine as you do that. So
Okay.
let me contact in here and get set up.
Okay. Tell me when you're ready.
And I'm ready, so go ahead and slowly start to go forward. And now start to go forward more. Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
This is wonderful.
Yeah, this is a great technique. I love receiving this kind of work. You would be my best friend if you did this to me every morning and night.
I can certainly see why. This is awesome.
So I'm just trying to open up the soft tissue that goes on either side of the spine. And with opening this tissue, it will start to add more length and freedom for the spine. How is all this feeling?
I just have to say I love you right now. I don't want to make your girlfriend mad or anything, you know, or my husband mad, but holy moly, this is just wonderful.
Okay, so there's one whole pass down your spine. So now I'm going to ask you to reverse that motion and use your feet to push yourself up and stack your vertebrae up one at a time.
Okay. Ready?
And I'll just place my hand on your spine to sort of feel how it moves. It gives me a sense of any restriction that might be in an area, and just the quality of the tissue. Is it free to move?
It's feeling pretty great to me.
So how was that?
Okay, that was really good.
Well, how about
Thank you.
how about I have you come back onto the table for a moment, and
okay.
if you would lie on your back this time with your head up at this end.
Okay. So we just have a couple more minutes.
And if you could scooch that way,
Yep.
just to make sure to great, perfect. So this is typically how I start and finish every session.
Okay.
I start by just sort of checking in up around the head and the neck area and start to feel for tensions on left or right side. And then I'll start to touch in around the base of the skull here. And it feels a little tighter on the right side here. I learned through this work that no one is symmetrical from left to right.
No.
People might come close, but often the left and right side feel a lot different from one another.
I hear you. So this is DeWane's from Brandywine Rolfing, and I'm Ingrid. This is Living It Up, Making Life Juicy. And you can find us on Facebook at Living It Up, Making Life Juicy, and stay tuned.